members, let them know what's going on. So we're good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our special board meeting. We are coming back from closed session, and I'll just share a few guidelines. The Board of Trustees requests that individuals who would like to address the Board of Trustees in person on a closed session item do so by filling out a request for address to address the OUC School Board. With that,
No, sorry, you're good.
oh, okay. And with that, we'll begin and report any actions taken in closed session. No action was taken in closed session. And so we will now start the Pledge of Allegiance. And if everyone could please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, we'll move on to discussion item 5A, and I'll turn it over to our superintendent.
Yes, thank you. We just have one guest online, so I just want to make sure that he can see what we're doing. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. So I will pull up my screen and all right, we have one agenda item, so we'll dive into it. So we're going to talk about Wagner Ranch Nature Area, and we'll do an update. And just let you know, I know we only have 3 board members in the quorum. We had some urgent things that had come up, and unfortunately, our 2 board members were not able to attend. But we didn't want.
Yeah, we can't hear too well. Yeah.
We could not have. Our last 2 board members could not attend in the last minute, but we didn't want to cancel the meeting or reschedule it. So we have 3 members. With that, our agenda for today is we're going to go through the most recent updates around property and ownership and boundaries around the nature area. We're going to cover a little bit around historical maintenance and upkeep. We will talk around just some current and existing safety concerns and issues in the nature area, and then ongoing maintenance requirements, and then ongoing considerations and next steps. So please, any questions as they come up, or at the end, I think as we're, just interrupt me, please. Okay. With that, let me minimize this so I can put this around here. All right. Okay, so, and by the way, we do have Todd McNeil in Zoom. I'm sorry, that's why I was playing around with the technology. Todd is one of our arborists that's been working in the area. He just could not be here in person. So if there are specific arborist questions, when we get to that section, we can get him on call and he'll Zoom in.
So nice of him to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Okay, so we had a meeting update. Well, we had several of them, like back in the fall. There were some questions around property ownership and boundaries, specifically around where's our specific boundary. I mean, with regards to the land ownership, the Wagner Ranch Elementary School property was obtained by Orinda Union School District. I think we clarified that from East Bay Mud in 1956. The school was built on a section of that property back in 1965. And then the large section of the property remained undeveloped, and it continues to be undeveloped. And that's known as the Wagner Ranch Nature Area. We can refer it right here. As you can see, that's the property outline. The entire property parcel is just around 33 acres. I say around because as we did the survey, the original property line actually went through what would be now right in the middle of the Camino Pablo. But because of the road and some changes since 1956, there's some adjustments to what 33 acres, what that would look like. So at the September 27th meeting, our next steps, the directives from the board were to do a land survey and appraisal so that we can actually determine accurate lines and put in the property markings, especially in that jagged area where the arrow is pointing, where we share a property line with East Bay Mud. Everything else is pretty delineated by the roads, but there is no clear delineation there. So we weren't, as the board was discussing next steps and what do we do, can the area be fenced or not fenced? We weren't even sure where that property line was. So those were the next steps when we last time met. So we did that. So a land survey and appraisal was completed. It was being done in December and January, and to confirm what those exact property boundaries are. The boundaries, to stake the division between the district and East Bay Mud property, and then also to assess the property for what kind of use can it be designated for. So you can see as we go back and forth referencing those two maps, I try to put them right next to each other so you can see where they are. But that's actually the most current on the right-hand side, the most current property, and I'll expand it on the next slide, but the most current parcel and the property lines with the appropriate acreages. So we'll go, if you look at it, I'm going to turn it now and expand it. And then just for your orientation, this is where the current school fields are, where most of the school buildings are. And that corner right there that's fenced off is the school blacktop. And then I put the solar panel designation right there just because it's a nice clear line of where that property is between kind of those four parcels right there. I would say for orientation, that's where the nature area garden is. And then everything around outside there is East Bay Mud property. Okay, so the elementary school, which was one big property, was really subdivided originally into four parcels. The two parcels that are really marked up right there have been developed with school buildings and fields. And then there are these two parcels right here that equal just under 16 acres. It's like 1597 have been undeveloped. And that's how they're marked as undeveloped areas of the school property. So any questions on the survey results or property lines? And just as a marking, all of this property, which is pretty covered in bushes and trees right now, there's visible stakes there right now. So you go in there, there's pink ribbons on stakes. And I think some of you have just been there recently, yes, and you can see those. So we have it delineated and marked off. So it's easy to see very clearly where's East Bay Mud and where's the school property. So just an overview of that. So survey and the appraisal was conducted. We have very accurate property lines now. They have been marked around the entire property of the school district, the school property. And what that allows us now to do is allows for property cleanup in collaboration with East Bay Mud. Because we have different requirements. We also, based on if you're a school district or not a school district, we also don't want to pay for cleanup on somebody else's property. So we now know where that is. There was some conversations around potential fencing along the property line. I mean, if you look back on that, that is a massive area and it's quite rugged there. It's not flat, of course. So in investigating that, I mean, we don't think that's actually feasible, but should there be a need for some sort of fencing on either portion of it or any area, we would know where to put that. And then we now can determine ongoing maintenance and property use based on either sections of that property or where we are. And also the appraisal allows, we could see what the zonings, constraints, how you can use it, what you can use it for. So we got a lot of good information out of those two really recent documents. Any questions on that before I move to the next topic? Okay. Okay, so maintenance and upkeep. So historically, what's been done, and I really want to, I know we have a lot of members of the audience in front of us. I'm trying to speak up. Are we okay? All right. It's hard to project and talk. But I did want to really put out here, and I hope you can read this. I know that it looks a little different on a slide versus the colors on the projection. The nature area is a beloved and unique natural space. And it has been preserved and maintained for years through dedication of community, volunteers, youth organizations, and citizen donations. These efforts have been largely coordinated by people in front of us, friends of the nature area. And I just want to say, to make sure that our community and you in front of us and those who are not right here and watching or will watch it in the future, I mean, we deeply appreciate that. We know that what has been done in the nature area, the reason it's probably preserved and why it's still there and is due to the efforts of the friends. So I just wanted to make sure that that's there and that you know that we recognize that and truly appreciate that. We also know that you could probably add many more buckets of ideas here of how this looks. I put that in here based on our conversations in the past. But there's conservation efforts there that historically there has been significant efforts made in the past years to maintain the Wagner Ranch nature area in that natural state and conserve as undeveloped property. And as you will see later, that is a goal that we share. You have put tremendous effort in education programming. Science that's currently happening, but historically, social studies, science programs have been organized for students in our district. And I think that is also a goal that we share. And there's partnership opportunities. Numerous volunteer opportunities for youth, adult groups have been historically available. And I think that is also a goal that we share, to have partnership opportunities. So again, just thank you from the district, because I think we all know that who has cared for the area. So we appreciate that. Any questions about any of that? Okay, so, but we move to what is happening right now. I didn't just say current status in the nature area, but it's a safety. And unfortunately, it continues to change like every day. And I also want to recognize, I know that there's a lot of frustration, and there seems to be frustration around how slow things are moving. But in some aspects, this just feels like this, every time we make a move or make a decision, the landscape changes underneath us. And what do I mean by that? So I'll talk also in the buckets of kind of safety issues that are currently happening. Storm damage is what we've been talking about for a couple of years. Every time there's a storm, there's more damage there. I was just there, board member Shogun was there, and Hillary Wiener, who's unfortunately not here today. We were there 2 days ago, and Stuart. And there was new damage to the big trees that was not there when we were there with Benita and Etta 2 weeks ago, because there was a storm in between those 2 days, 2 weeks. So there's new storm damage there every time because of the what's happening in the area. So the property was significantly damaged during the 22-23 winter storms. That's when the closure happened. But it continues to show tree, path, and creek damages after each weather storm. But then there's new issues, and this is where I say the landscape continues to change. I mean, we've always done fire mitigation, but we live in a very different environment this year than we did 2 years ago. And will actually next week versus 2 weeks ago when it comes to fire mitigation. And you'll hear what I mean by that. But there are increased concerns with fire safety, new fire mitigation requirements that didn't exist on top of us, that weren't placed upon us last year, that were placed upon us 3 months ago. So there's just an ongoing focus on the fire safety in the area. And then there's existing structures. As we continue to build up schools and upgrade schools, there's more scrutiny placed on old structures. We're dealing with it on every campus of our school district, not just the nature area. That's new as of a couple of weeks ago. So that's why I say the landscape is changing for us all the time. So every time we feel like we make 2 steps forward, we're taking 4 steps back. So there are existing structures built in the property that do not meet Department of State Architect or DSA and school standards. So I'll go deeper into each one of these. The ongoing storm damage and tree maintenance. And this is where I would say, if you have any questions for Todd, his expertise is clearly much deeper than mine on this. There, significant work must be completed to remove the downed and damaged trees. And then we have to conduct the necessary tree pruning. Originally, there were 100 trees identified, but then once we actually had the property lines clearly delineated, the report came back at 63 trees on the OUSD designated property were tagged in need of tree work. 23 of those must be removed. Some of them, I know all of you've been there, the huge eucalyptus trees, right? So trees have been marked for removal and trimming. The estimate for that tree work is anywhere between $400,000 to $700,000, depending on how we designate the area for use. If we designate a wider area for where significant educational programming will be, because if the students are there for a lot of educational programming and camps, you have to trim the trees back more. If it's just for a walkthrough, it's a different kind of tree usage, or tree trimming. So that's a huge number for just an initial storm damage repair on trees. That doesn't include any of the other issues that we were talking about. So we did, our arborists did consult with biologists to ensure safety of the protected species in the nature area. But we actually have to do additional environmental consultation as we proceed. So that is just phase 1. So just to even do the initial consultation, we had to do that. But when we start trimming the trees, when we start actually removing the trees, we're going to have to involve Fish and Wildlife and then the biologists to do that. The path works, we have paths that have eroded and need to be repaired to ensure accessibility. And then paths along the creek, they belong to actually East Bay Mud. But those on OUSD property will need some repair depending on the designated use. I say that depending on if they're heavily used for camps, our school educational programming, they have to be ADA accessible versus if they're hiking paths for like open space. Mm-hmm. So it just depends what the use is.
Is there a deadline when the trees need to be removed?
The removal we can do at any point right now. Yeah. Meaning deadline like timing.
Yeah.
There's better timing for pruning for sure, but removal or cutting, they said we would do it at any point, as soon as we can. Yeah.
Is there any?
There's fire mitigation deadlines.
When is that?
Yesterday.
Typically it's the end of May. But right. we were...
The 100-foot break,
yeah.
We were supposed to do 3 months ago, but we've been given a waiver while we're securing funding, which we'll talk about in a second. Katie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm guessing the answer to this one, but given the high estimate, was there work done by the arborist in terms of high need, medium need, and immediate, can be done a little bit later in terms of phasing the work for the tree removal specifically, or are they all lumped into one category of immediate need versus,
Depends on what we do and where we go, right? So yes, depending, like, so in the area, if you're running programming.
Right, a lot of people, like,
Correct.
all based on usage
Correct.
essentially.
Correct.
Okay, but there was no.
And
timing of,
some
like,
there are,
this tree needs to
I think
come
there
out
are some
now.
like those are imminent. Yeah,
Yes,
this-
that's my
the-
question.
Those were tagged as a must go. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yes, please. Thank you.
All good. I did assign a 3 levels of priority to the work to be done to the trees as the site is currently outlined, with the expectation that we're going to be following the existing property boundaries. So within my report, yes, I do outline what should occur first and what can wait. And just to clarify, the estimate that we got for between $400,000 and $700,000, that was prior to the survey, the overall site survey being completed. So when we got that estimate, that was for the entirety of the property up to the creek. And so it's likely that the true estimate is going to be lower.
Which side of it?
Right, it's still a really large range, I guess, for this
Yeah.
year, so, okay, but it's helpful to know how the report's been done.
Any other questions for Todd while he's talking?
I have a question, Todd. When this work is done, I'll think about the eucalyptus trees, for example, that I'm assuming would be big, heavy equipment to come in and take it down. How does protecting the area around it, the wildlife, how does that all play into it? Is there, a plan that would have to come up with prior to do it to get the okay from Fish and Wildlife? How does that process work, Todd?
So I've had a couple of conversations with the wildlife biologists about this. They're going to be the ones that are going to make the ultimate call there. But we're going to have to provide to Fish and Wildlife a map of the site, outlining places where the wildlife biologist has noted, for instance, the wood rat nests. We need to take into consideration the tributary that goes into Bear Creek, how we're going to protect that, the watershed there. So yes, we would be definitely taking precautions. And likely there would be a crane coming in. I don't know exactly where that would go, but we would be working, closely with wildlife biologists and with the contractors to make sure that we have best managed practices throughout.
Okay.
So as we, we're waiting for the funding, we have until, it should be done by May, right? Or ish.
It really, as far as the fire break, it's more field conditions than a
And
count.
anything else, yeah.
So if we have all this rain that we've had and the nice weather comes, it'll be definitely pushing up that. We will be getting notices, get in and get it done now.
Okay,
And we'll get into fire next, if we're
Okay.
ready to that.
yeah,
These are just a couple of pictures of, this is that old oak tree that keeps, branches are breaking, and then all of these keep falling down. These are some new trees that have come down in the nature area now. So fire mitigation, you just mentioned that. So current and new fire mitigation requirements. I mean, we've always worked closely with the MOFD to ensure appropriate fire breaks and fire mitigation measures to ensure safety of the entire community. I mean, it's not just nature area, it is clearly the entire community. It's a big property. But there are some new requirements that have been put in place. So there is a 100-foot fire break now around the perimeter, and we'll show a map of that. And we have been put on notice, as I said. So like back in December, we were given a first notice of implementation. We are working closely with MOFD too, as we've been asked to pause on that while we secure funding. I just want to note that this is separate from the funding to open up the nature area. This is for fire mitigation. So they have helped us out to apply for Measure X funding that is for fire mitigation. So that would offset some of the costs if they could come in and clear some of those. There are some of the big trees in there that are considered
That are tagged.
already and hazardous. So hopefully that would work out as kind of an overlap of both, right? The funding is supported. Measure X is supporting. However, while the state is really supportive of us doing fire mitigation, they still want us to follow all of the old requirements of environmental quality. So like California environmental quality, CEQA, so which is, we were just notified that we have to provide those environmental reports. So that's our next plan, meeting with MOFD next week, figuring out what do we do with that. And then again, working with environmentalists to provide that report, which
So-
should take a while.
And they have to approve they have to come out and approve. Can you walk us through what that process might be like?
I'm going to look to Stuart.
It's quite
Yes.
lucky. I mean, I talked to Fish and Wildlife, not even on this area. It was, some of our creek areas that we have to get in and do fire mitigation. And she was telling me it's at least a 2-month process. And we didn't get into that. It's as far as, your initial survey, your plan on what to do. They're reviewing it. They'll give their input. You're making the adjustments. There's a lot of back and forth before you can stamp, get in and get it done. So I imagine you just take that and multiply it for something this size.
Yes, we have heard sometimes up to 6 months, year. We're hoping that the designation of the fire mitigation will speed it up, but
And then
the
in terms
agencies
of
don't seem to be
cost,
working together. Well, the cost, if it's the cost for the reporting would be on the district.
on the district.
But
okay.
the Measure X would hopefully cover the actual mitigation work in the liquor. Next week, Governor Newsom's already issued that there will be certain areas of the state that will be designated as high fire zones.
Mhm.
So next week, that list will be issued, I think on Monday is what the expectation is. So there is high probability that this entire area will be on that list. So we don't know what kind of requirements come with that. We had received questions from board members in the past around, can we estimate what is the ongoing cost of fire mitigation? Just in talking to Todd and talking to Stuart separately, like how could we even possibly estimate what does a fire mitigation cost us? I mean, CAL FIRE has done that before in there. It's like controlled fire burns. I mean, that's free to us. Measure X hopefully would fund some of this. But just as a comparison, we could not actually estimate because we haven't had to deal with these requirements before. But as a comparison, we pulled how much it cost us for our 5 school districts, so just creeks and the areas around in 23-24 was tree removal and brush was $55,000.
And
this
brush
area-
is literally just the weed whacking.
So, and when I asked Stuart, I'm like, so what do you think? Is this like 10 times, 20 times more at least?
Yeah,
So, I mean, I'm not saying that that's what the cost
Right.
is, but that was
Annually.
that 1 year
That was
cost
last
for
year.
our 5.
And again, that was just the weed whacking. Now they're looking at, your Scotch bloom. There's certain plants that are high in oil that now those have to come out. So the scope is increasing every time.
So we
And
just,
that comes out of the 55.
that was our
Comes
general.
out of general
Yeah,
fund.
correct.
Would you say that the fire mitigation then would really be, in terms of ongoing maintenance, so were we to clean up the area in terms of taking down trees that are dangerous and making sure that it's as safe fire-wise as possible, the fire mitigation sounds like the big chunk annually that needs to be done. The plants come back and they need to be cut down. Maybe this is a question for our arborists, like what would be the ongoing cost in terms of making sure trees and that kind of thing is that a every 5-year thing? Is that an every 10-year? Is that annual? I'm trying to get a better sense of
So
cost.
I can look in here. What we would do moving forward is, and this is specifically for the nature area, myself or someone with similar qualifications would walk through the area once a year, and we would look for signs of elevated risk. And if there is something that warrants action, we would recommend that action. But it is not likely that every year you're going to have to do tree work. It's not likely that the average annual cost would exceed $5,000 in tree work once we get through this initial phase of removals and pruning. But that does not include any fire mitigation. That's just for tree risk specifically. Would probably be on average $3,000 to $5,000 a year.
Thank you.
Right, that's tree work, not fire
Yeah.
mitigation, correct?
Okay, yeah, that answers my question, but where the real money is really in the fire mitigation, which is annual.
Right. This is the new 100-foot fire break would go right through on our property line. I mean, there's a lot of debates around where that 100-foot break should be, could be. It's not that this map was provided based on the notice that was given to us by MOFD. It's directly out of the notice where the 100-foot fire break needs to run along. That's the eucalyptus tree on the left. I mean, those are the kind of things that have to all be removed. It's on the right, like the dead trees and everything on the ground. So, and then that last bucket of the safety matter. This is again the changing landscape of just most recently. All structures on any school district. I'll talk for our state. On our district-owned property. Regardless if it's a school site, it's our property, must be approved by Department of State architects. The way that usually works is staff obtains permits. We ensure all inspections are conducted in order for all structures to meet the required school codes. And then the DSA gives you, certificate of completion, and they record that in their records. We do, if there are structures that are found not to be up to the DSA code, they cannot be used. That has happened, that either there haven't been finished certification that we have found, not that they're not up to code, they've been built up to code, or there's something placed on our properties at the school campuses, but some final thing was not completed 30 years ago. As we do improvements to our campuses, DSA is scrutinizing all of our structures that are present. So one project triggers another project. So,
and then on top of that, the wildlife urban interface, you used to have a threshold here. Now it's up here with the materials that are being used to construct and
correct.
all that. So things have gotten
So we have
quite
to change
expensive.
our roofs, some of our shingles. We're now as of last November, I say change of landscape. We're, our entire district basically is designated as a liquefaction zone. So what we build on there, how we build, all of those things matter now. It's a different, zoning.
Mm-hmm.
So either our structures have been closed down. We're dealing with one of them at another school site, or new projects are not permitted when old projects are found not to be up to DSA code. So then we can't move forward with a new project until that's being addressed. So there are structures in the area that have just recently been seen by a DSA inspector, like a greenhouse, outdoor kitchen, that are present that we at this moment do not have we don't have records of DSA approval. So if DSA certification records are unavailable, we'll need to either reinforce the structures or to meet the code, meet the certification, or they have to be removed. And what we are finding that it's actually cheap. It's been cheaper to remove them than to reinforce them to get up to code because it's so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have any estimates at this time because it's so recent of what this would cost. This is what we're talking about. I mean, this is just a picture of the greenhouse. That was most recently tagged by the DSA. And then the paths around the greenhouse are not considered ADA accessible. So those will all have to be adjusted. Any questions on any of the safety matters?
And so what is I know it's fairly new in the DSA. Have they provided any type of deadline or timeline for us that we
Well,
need to
Don't use until you fix.
just period?
That's it.
Okay.
I know this has come up on some of our other campuses recently, so I feel like I've heard a lot of the information. So I don't have any specific questions around this because this has come up on other campuses.
Okay, so then ongoing safety concerns must be addressed prior to any use of the nature area. I mean, safety has to be our number one priority. Let's say once all of those things are addressed, and it is our plan to address them and hope, but we do need to plan for ongoing and regular maintenance has to be put in place. And I know there's already been questions and some of these have been answered. As Todd just mentioned, regular tree care, 3 to 5 years with annual checkup. He called it walkthrough annually, 3 to 5 years. And I got that information from him. So that would be to make sure that the trees are maintained, because part of the damage is we don't want another storm to keep causing these damages if the trees are not healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to make sure that they're maintained appropriately. And then fire mitigation, Stuart said through May, by May, we usually have to, it really depends on the season. Last year, we had to do it twice, right? So if you have late rains, you're going to have early blooms and late blooms. If you have early rains, excuse me. So then if you have late rains, you may not do it in the spring, but you need to do it in the fall or in the summer. So it just depends on the rain season. Do we sometimes have to do fire mitigation 2 times in a year because how things growing. So, but we would continue doing the control burns with MOFD, but we need to be taking care of the weeds and the brush.
Part of their controlled burns too is they don't have the same manpower that they had or availability with all the fires throughout the state. Those resources have been spread out. So getting that done as regularly as we'd like, working with the fire department is going to be a challenge.
Then we talked about the new perimeter requirement for fire mitigation. That is an ongoing must keep, 100 feet clear perimeter. And then I say question mark around the new requirements because we'll know more next week around that.
Mm-hmm.
I say ongoing path maintenance because we haven't even ventured there yet. There's so many other concerns that we haven't gotten even to the idea of because we haven't determined what the use is, what kind of use, and how far into the area to even get to what kind of path maintenance do we, but paths do need to be maintained as we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on the ongoing maintenance? Okay, then I'll jump on to, so now what? Earlier on, when we were talking about some goals that I believe were shared with what has been going on for years. We still maintain those goals and as we move forward, and this was shared, I think, by the board as well back in September. We do want to make sure that the area, majority of it is placed under conservation. We're committed to ensuring conservation of the property. We have been adamant that we do not want the property to be built upon. There is no development of the property, so we do want to make sure that there's a conservation of the property. We're committed to providing education. We've talked about, in addition to conservation, I think at the last meeting in September, the question posed to the board was, did you want to conserve the entire property, or do you want to hold back some of it for programming and bring back educational programming rooted in science, curriculum? And that was the direction of maintaining an area to make sure that that's where the educational programming was. So that is still we want to make sure that we return educational programming, science-based into the area. And then continue the partnerships, providing opportunities for community partnerships, especially with City of Orinda. We have a strong relationship with them. They run programs on our campuses already, so we have that. And then youth organizations. I know we have Scouts right in front row here. We have Scout programs on Scout projects on every single campus, every single, yes. So those are, great opportunities throughout the area to continue those partnerships as well. So how do we, where do we go with that? I have to reinforce that we just cannot recommend the use of general fund to support the cleanup or ongoing maintenance. I mean, when I say that, because while we put tremendous value on what can happen in the nature area, and on a safety of the nature area, I think taking money directly out of the core curriculum of the classroom, this district is very low funded. We depend heavily on a community support to maintain even our, core curriculum. It would be, we just cannot do that. So we cannot recommend that. So what does it look like? So to fulfill those established goals of conservation, education, and partnership, we recommend to the board for consideration and discussion options. What can we do for property conservation? So there's some options there of what we can do. And before we start that, I just wanted to touch upon some funding opportunities. We are still in ongoing and collaborative conversations with Assembly Members' Office, BioRK, and staff regarding available funds from the state legislature. That has not gone away, and we have very productive conversations. We're on the same page with our goals. We have been meeting regularly, and I think are aligned in how we want to move forward. I think it's just in the logistics of what do we do with it? How do we handle the property and ongoing costs? They're very understanding. Clearly, they're at the state legislature with regards to all the new fire safety issues and all the other things that have come up. So we're on the same page. Other funding opportunities, we talked about Measure X funding availability for fire mitigation. We hope that will come through. And then, we all have budget. We have a budget committee. We have other people that come up to us to say, could the nature area be a potential revenue option? So what does that look like? How can the nature area sustain itself? Or how could it not be an ongoing cost to the general fund, right? So, I mean, we have heard ideas around could generate enough revenue through camps where we invite others, right? Could it be a venue that could be rented out? I think all of those sort of conflict sometimes with some conservation things. Sometimes we don't know that we can generate enough revenue for how much the ongoing cost could be. And then the idea is around land trust. Could it be placed in a land trust in partnership with another trust organization so that that sustains the ongoing cost? And that would also conserve the property as well. Mm-hmm. So there is some opportunity there as well. So really the ongoing funding is a concern, but it will depend on programming in the area. So I put discussion to the board. Maybe these should be like question marks instead of statements, really, but it's for discussion and consideration. I think I had like 3 dots at the end of those, but conservation, we're potentially that these 2 areas are developed. There's some free choice right here. But we had in the past talked about could an area be conserved or not? So for a discussion, would we consider working with another organization and putting conservation on like 1 parcel or 2 parcels, like with a trust that could potentially provide the district with decrease in liability or no liability, but we would not have control over it either. So there are some, trade-offs there. And I'm talking about, like the John Muir Land Trust is a trust, Save Mount Diablo is the trust, Briones, they belong to us. They're a park, state park, right? So what does that look like? So that place is a conservation, appeals to that goal, but it's not used for programming. Then the remainder of the parcel would be able to be used for educational programming. So there could be a fencing around access to the area, and then the district could run educational programming once it's made safe. We have a curriculum director here to see what would that look like, right? For our district to then send students there, run camps and so on in the future. I want to put that we as a staff, I put it up there for discussion, but we do not recommend a sale of any of the parcels. Yes, that is allowed based on the appraisal. Yes, the city could rezone it, but we do not, because there's a potential of rezoning. We would not want development of the land. And we're very worried about who our neighbors could be right next to the school site. So it would go contradictory to our goal of conservation. Once you sell it, you don't have any control. So that's why we say that we don't recommend that. But the ongoing liability, the ongoing maintenance, it's not fiscally responsible for us either. So I throw that to you for a discussion.
Yeah. Thank you for such a comprehensive report, Aida. I really appreciate it. I know we all appreciate it here at the board. And I just like to echo your comments and thank all of you in the audience today and those who are unable to join us for all the work you've done up to this point to continue to preserve such a special place. So thank you, Fona, here and online. For all you've done for our community, our students, and our district. It's such a beautiful and rich place. The area is so special. And so, I appreciate also that we're trying to solve for something very complicated with many complicated groups and individuals, right? Who want to maintain and continue to enhance the area of the nature area for our students, for our district. And to be clear, I agree with you, do not want to sell that property to a developer at all. It's essential that it remain as hopefully a place that we can share science-based curriculum still for our students. I think that's very essential. I would also like to mention that, we're all aligned to ensure the nature area reopen. That is critical and very important to me. It's a part of what we are able to offer our students. I know my children have been to the nature area in the past, not my youngest, but the older two have. And so I will add our goals are very, very similar. We want to see the nature area reopen so our students can enjoy and learn from that very special place that will benefit and continue to benefit for generations, our students in our district. And as we look forward to reopening along our very extended to-do list that you just shared, and we're still in learning mode, right? It continues to grow as we receive feedback from DSA, from the other abbreviated environmental agency you just mentioned, from East Bay Mud, the many consultants that we've continued to engage for this very special initiative. We want to be fiscally responsible. I do agree that general funds should not be used for this. We have curriculum. We have other prioritized needs for our children, our students. And so as this is a priority as well, to reopen, I do agree general funds should not be used. But I do appreciate though that, the grants, the Measure X, and of course, Assembly members funding, and hopefully other opportunity funding that comes to play, that we're applying for that, we're searching for that. And we have what's necessary to reopen the nature area. I also would consider looking at one of the discussion consideration bullet points up there, that we do work with another org to preserve one parcel maybe. I want to make sure that we continue to keep the garden, and where we have, the science projects and the scout projects, thank you, so that, if we can offer that, hopefully, if that's part of that, that parcel there. But I would like to hear, the options of working and partnering with an organization for one of the parcels. And would consider that. And so that would lessen our liability for the districts, because it has been so expensive, and to help cover us. So with that, I turn it to my colleagues for additional discussion.
So first of all, I had a question that goes way back to the beginning, but I know it's not zoned for housing, but I forget the actual distinction. Do you happen to know that the zoning was it like public use, I believe, or something
Public
like that?
use, so like a park, a graveyard, a school could expand, but
That's the
public
current
use.
zoning.
Current zoning, correct. And that's determined by the city or held by the city.
Yeah, and it would have been like the original agreement when the district
Correct.
got the property
Yes.
in 1956. Yeah, Etta, you were very eloquent. But I will also say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for partnering. Thank you for the work you did. As Aida said, Hillary and I went to the property earlier this week, just to been there a little bit of time. It's not my committee. It's an awesome piece of property. It really is. It's really unique and special, and it's a huge asset. I think I know that there's a lot of frustration around how long this is taking to decide what to do, make next steps, figure out what to do. It's a huge and awesome opportunity to really get it in a spot that's sustainable going forward. So this conversation isn't coming up constantly of how we're going to pay for that. We can't use general funds. I'm also serving on the budget committee. We're so tight just to pay for the education in the classrooms that's happening every day. It's really wonderful to have this. We also don't have a way to sustainably pay for it annually without having more discussions about using general fund, and I don't think that we should. I also want to see it reopen. I think all three of my kids have been to the Wagner Ranch Nature Area for field trips. I've chaperoned them. The majority of that programming is happening on that second parcel in
Right here.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say like almost the entire day when I've been there for chaperoning that. It has the garden, it had the outdoor kitchen, the adobe bricks, and all the other wonderful stuff that was happening was in that parcel. We did go out hiking a couple of times through some other areas, which I guess part of it would have been East Bay Mudd's property, and then around. But that's actually a pretty big piece of land right there that we have to work with alone. And I think there's a ton of opportunity to make that. We have to be safe. The kids have to be able to go in there safely. I think, the paths, the structures all need to be up to code so that we can have our own students, but also potentially as a revenue source, other students come in that has to be up to code in order to do that. Right now it's not, but that area has a lot of potential in terms of making it accessible and usable for science education. I don't think we should give that up. I think that's really unique. We should not give that up. And so that leads me to the other parcels, which again, I was just on this week. I have the same concerns. Even if an entity were to purchase it and say they were going to turn it into parks or whatever, they could rezone it, and we have no control of that anymore. So my thought is similar to Edda's. I would like to see what organizations are out there to put it into a land trust with conservation. I think the details, the devil's of the details. I would want to know accessibility by both students and the community in using those parcels going forward. I was up in the open space by Akalani's not that long ago, and it's sort of in between homes and houses, and obviously this was on my mind, and I was thinking, okay, it must be a similar arrangement where you can access it, that it's maintained by the trust, but it's not going to be developed. And if we could still have access to that space, but it was definitely conserved and the public could also use it, I'd be curious to know how those details could be drawn up. I know in the past, who's liable, that becomes an issue again. So that's right. If we put it into a land trust, who is liable and when can it be used? We are a school with kids, so we want to make sure people who are using it, we have some understanding of who's there. But I think that could be a reasonable way to make this sustainable, where the resources we do have, hopefully from Rebecca Bauer-Cahan's office, can go towards the parcel we want to use most for outdoor ed and for science education. And then, work with someone to figure out how to make that a really useful space. Again, having just been to another open space, I was thinking like, well, that would be so great to go walk that space. It literally backs up to Brioni's. My son runs at Campo and they always run from Wagner over there through Brioni's and back. And it would be an amazing resource, I think, for the community as well. I know that the property has been used by the Friends of the Nature area all the way through those parcels, including for things like the Olive Festival. Again, devil's in the details. I think understanding use and permit use for space would be important too, so that the rest of the community understands that. And we also have an understanding of that too. Make sure it's our community can still benefit from it. Let me just check my notes. I think those are mostly my thoughts. Yeah, and I think the last thing that has come up, and you mentioned the changing landscape. The fire risk, as a board member, comes to our attention constantly now, and it of course should always, but with the LA fires, it is really top of mind. And so for that reason, the tree work needs to be done, the brush needs to be maintained. All of our campuses are situated in lovely settings, backing up to nature. And that's not going away. That is something that I think, as stewards of the schools, we also need to consider, is that really as safe as it can be? And so that's a concern of mine. The cleanup has to be done. And that kind of cleanup, Stuart, if you're talking about minimum 50,000 a year plus to do that, it would be helpful to have a partner in making sure that that's safe.
Yeah, you figure that was with a 30-foot break.
That was a 30-foot break.
So,
Right, now we're talking 100-foot break.
right, so you can imagine how exponential.
I guess the last thought I had regarding the community's use, because I think this is also a unique property because of the amount of community involvement on district property. I think you'd be hard pressed to find that kind of interaction elsewhere in our state, where that's been a shared resource. Would be, were parcels to go into a land trust, what accessibility would there be for the Boy Scouts to still do projects? Or how would that, work? I'm sure we could use the help in the parcel that we're using for educational purposes, but would like to understand how those kind of things are addressed in the land trust. And it may or may not work out, but I want to know kind of where that stands. I know there's the historical site with the Wagner property on there. I was there the other day, like, what does that look like? Can that remain untouched? I think it's a really neat spot. I would like to understand that. But I think those things do exist near us in Brioni's, like I said, in the open space that I've been on, areas are nicely preserved. I think that's it for now. That was a lot.
I think I got him. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I want to echo the sentiments of my fellow board members with everything that you all have shared and the concerns, the gratitude. I do have a question. What does 100-foot break mean? What does that look like?
It's wide.
No, but what does it?
Yeah.
I'm not.
Well, when we were doing a 30-foot break, for example, it was mainly the grass, the grass that comes up every year.
Like 100 foot from the property line?
It's from the edge of the property line in.
Okay.
Because I can't go in outside the property line, it's not ours.
You're right.
So I can't,
Okay.
so it'd be the inside in. And again, it's not just the grass now, it's removing oily plants to the Scotch broom. There's certain plants that are high in oil that they want removed completely. So it'd be identifying that. The dead trees, the limbs that are dry and are anything that's a fuel, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay.
Fire fuel. And we partner with MOFD when we're doing this, especially now with the increased demands of us. Before we go and go ahead and get pricing for the scope. And we want to make sure that the scope is clearly defined, so we're all on the same page. We're doing it once. So we would be walking with the fire MOFD to define exactly what they're talking about, because the last few summers that I've been here, it's been pretty well, just taking down the grass.
Yeah.
They've been good with a 30-foot, some common sense approach. And now it's much more stringent. And I don't want to be guessing, I can take my interpretation, what I think the 100-foot break is. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to engage them and make sure that I know exactly what that scope is.
Okay. And then the tree removal, we're hoping Measure X, we can use that for
Just,
or-
Measure X
Yeah,
will only be for
do
the perimeter.
Okay, so
Money-
the money,
Because it's for fire mitigation and we applied for this, for that 100-foot break only.
and then the money to take down, remove the trees and stuff would come from,
Well, either if we would and I heard a couple now either we work with
With
a
another-
partnership, should we put that in a trust, and that was part of an agreement that we could make, or out of assembly members' funding.
Okay.
But the more it goes on the tree
The less there
removal
is
and
to-
cleanup, the less we have for ongoing curriculum
right,
on the development.
okay.
Yes.
I'm just
But
trying to
that's
think
where it
of
would come from.
timing. So if you were to put it into a trust, because
The property,
I'm just trying to think, like the community members here, you all want, and I do too. I mean, all three of my kids have attended the nature area for field trips, for Pioneer Days, for the Rancho Days, and they've all been able to be with Miss Torres. Yeah, and experience all her knowledge and her love for the nature area. So I'm just wondering, timing wise, if you were to put it into a trust, like how long would it take after that for the trees to to get the funding to remove the trees? Is how much?
the funding's available now. The fire mitigation is not. I mean, the funding from assembly members is available as soon as we can commit into some conservation deal that satisfies their requirements.
Okay.
So it's just, the question is, if we put all of that funding into fire mitigation,
Mhm.
We Won't have anything for.
we will not be opening it it will be open, but not open for any
Use of
curriculum.
We don't know how much the Measure. X
No,
would-
you submit a project and they fund it based on what the need is. Mhm. So that's why it's almost like, I mean, we can start doing if we can get into an agreement that's, we can start doing certain things.
I mean, when we went to tour the area a couple of weeks ago, I mean, my main concern was safety and having kids and staff there with something happening. And so that is the priority, is to make sure that area is safe enough so that it can be used to the extent that it needs to be. I'm just trying to figure out, because it's been closed for so many years now, what do we need to do so that so that it can, like the timeline can kind of speed up a little, I don't know, but without.
I mean, I just want to say, I understand the frustration with the timeline. If you were just talking about the storm and the tree
Right.
removal,
Yeah.
that's where we were a year ago. That's all we were talking about.
Right.
We could say, and we got into an agreement of here's how conservation, I don't know, if we could negotiate the agreement that is acceptable to an
Mhm.
assembly member, which we were not able to do last year.
Right.
But let's just say we were. I guess it would take a few months to open it up because it takes a while to do all the work, right? but now you have a 100-foot break for fire mitigation. Now you have all of that, and you have to remove all the structures and make the paths ADA accessible. So we just added more work to it.
Yeah.
So the way it works is, the reason we've been able to open up the garden, because it's fenced off. So the actual, the nature area garden. So the way it was described to us is, like, that's fenced off, so you can prevent the public from wandering into the unsafe areas, right? So we have talked about, like, could we phase open it, right? So we could, like, let's say that we had agreed that the district would, like, reopen this area. Now that we actually have property lines, right? And we could, if we were to put a fence around here, so to connect it, right, like this,
Okay.
we could actually move forward and clean up this area. That was our original plan, to do that, because then you can expand and start curricular programming in that area, because that's not as significant. You don't also have as many protected species of, like, the wood rats. Not all, they're not here. They're usually over here. But so we could start working in that area.
And then just delay removing the trees.
Right, but we couldn't get, well, there are trees there too. There's big old trees and there's all sorts of, but it's not as many
Right.
as the entire property.
Okay.
But we couldn't get the money because we hadn't put this in an agreeable agreement. So that's why now that there's an openness, okay, let's put that into some sort of a trust. But is that trust agreeable, right? Are we willing to just give it into a trust, hold on to liability, or give it into a trust without liability? Because giving it to somebody with their control and holding on liability on you, I can't recommend that.
I think one unknown last time also was how the land is divided, which is why the survey's helpful.
Correct.
And where
We did
those
not have
parcel
that.
lines are drawn,
Exactly.
because a year ago, or when we were trying to access
In
the
September.
assembly members'
Yeah.
money, it was everything, and then you would still be liable, but didn't have
Correct.
control over the property.
Correct.
The area that's what had been mostly used for educational purposes, like, you'd want control over that. And there was even discussion all the way to, like, any sort of bathrooming
Right.
facility. Okay, well, yeah, if you're going to rent it out to our city or to other students to come use, like, they need to have a restroom, like, and so it was more complicated
Correct.
and more stringent in terms of what we could access. But now that you can see where the parcel lines are, it might be
It'd be easier
more
to
open
negotiate.
negotiating
Correct.
what is conserved completely and what the district
Yes.
still maintains,
Yeah.
so that we can do what we're saying we want to do with the property.
Yeah. So I think if we're open to figure out, and again, as Katie said, devil's in the details, and there's a lot of details there. We can do that now that we know the property lines to 2 parcels or 1 parcel, and see what that looks like, or these 2, and then maintain where the educational programming is here. I think that could be agreed, we could agree to that. That could go into conservation, and then we could start moving on that, because then the funding becomes available. And then while we're still working on the Measure X funding for the ongoing mitigation and the 100-foot perimeter. But I do want to be realistic that I don't know how long, like, for us to develop, and I'm just going to look at Sarah here, is, that could move forward a timeline of reopening the area. Let's just even say if we get in a super successful trust, we all feel good about it, we get the funding for that, we can put the fencing here to protect it, to separate, delineate. For us to, then we're still dealing with the structures, paths that have to be upgraded. It takes time. Inspectors, I mean, guys, we've all are doing all sorts of building projects that take a lot of time. We are dependent on a state coming in, doing inspections, approving things, and then staffing, coordinating, getting additional grants to run ongoing programming. Because the last thing we want to do is, here's all new programming, and then run out of money in the year after. So doing a successful program that I know a couple of us have seen in, another district that's an ongoing effort. It took them a decade to build it. I'm not saying it's 10 years, but this is not like, I think for us to build a true embedded curriculum that's going to be here to stay is not going to happen overnight.
No.
I think it's going to take time to build.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, I mean, I don't know if you want to,
Yeah, I mean,
happy for you to contradict me.
no, I would agree. To get to the stage where you are using the space for really high quality curricular programming aligned to our science standards, is not going to happen overnight, right? Yeah. You've got to develop that curricular programming. You've got to identify the staff who are going to support it, or you've got to support teachers themselves in training and how to implement it. So that takes a lot of time, in addition to our other curricular initiatives, balancing that.
And it has been our goal has been for that not to be a additional field trip on our students, which they pay for and get to go to, but a required part of science embedded curriculum. That was our ultimate goal, how we would get there, is that if we're going to build something and it's truly, then it needs to be embedded in the curriculum. And then every Orinda unit, school district, every one of our students has to go there, experience it, and it's part of their curriculum, TK through 8th grade. If we can open it wider, great, but it is part of our curriculum. So it's a mandate. But we need to build it for that to be a meaningful programming.
Any more discussion before we open it up to public comment?
My follow-up to that is, it's just, I think I said it earlier, I think it will take a long time to get it to, I understand that, even just the building facility stuff that we're doing at our other sites. Something comes up, and I'll get all that, and it's gonna take a while, but it really could get to a point where, again, this doesn't have to be an annual or semi-annual discussion about how the funding is going to work and who's going to go, when they're going, and do you need to close it and what's unsafe. And I think that would be awesome for the district, for the students, for the whole community. In terms of curriculum, what also makes it really unique, and I think a lot of people in the room already know, is that we live in California, and there's a whole lot of California history that's done in the elementary grades, and the land does lend itself to exploring that easily. And there's a lot of history there. So I don't think they're not starting at ground zero, but there's ways to make that more programmatic, but the baseline's already there. Like all of our kids here have attended Rancho days and got to explore things. There's work to be done there, but there is already like a really good base, I think, for the education piece. And as I mentioned before, in terms of potentially putting it into a land trust, I would want to understand accessibility to those other parcels for students. May or may not, be doable, but students can go on a field trip where that includes a hike to an open space or to a park or to Brioni's or something like that. So could there be an accessibility, which really is ideal, where you could be using the space that we own, but also have access to the rest of the property without the liability.
Okay, anything else? All right. We have public comment from tourists and John, sorry.
Yeah. I would like to go last, but there's too many other people here that you should hear from.
Oh, we only have two. We have two cards, sorry.
Yeah, you guys.
Okay.
Can you give us a second here? Just need to determine how many we have.
Okay. Yeah. Because we have 9 cards here, we will, everyone will have 2 minutes instead of 3. Okay, just because of the length.
That's okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, Dan Phillips. Thank you for the comments and for the hard work. I mentioned that. Mine to be a little more scattered. My reference more to the nature area garden. We aren't allowed to use it right now, so I was hoping it could be open. We won't use the greenhouse until it's up to standards or taken down or rebuilt. we'd have to get in there, it's interrupting with projects that we're trying to get done. Boy Scout projects and the assistant scientist. Otherwise, I had a couple of questions. You can get volunteers to help with the maintenance. It's been done in the past. And the other one I had, does anyone care if we use, or you're using the area that they have that's on the school side of the San Pablo Creek? Because in the past, we could go along those paths. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, we are unable to respond to any questions that you may pose today, but thank you, Ken. Reginald Barrett.
I have so many questions and comments that I think what I'm going to do is simply tell Stuart that I'm happy to meet with him anytime he wants on any aspect of any of this, okay? In case you're not aware, for 20 years, I've been the guy maintaining the place out there. These fingers right there have done it all. For example, the picture you had of the olive orchard, that was solid poison oak. Not a good fire situation. I cleaned all that up and I got a guy to come in and fix the trees for free. Okay, so there's been a lot going on where people from the community want to help. Yet you told me I can't go in there, period. I think that's ridiculous. And after all, I'm a tax-paying citizen. You guys work for me. And yet you're telling me I can't go help out. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. We have John Helm.
Two comments. One is, has any discussion been had with the California Department of Forestry regarding a grant? They have $200 million a year in order to help people with making their properties fire safe. The second comment is, I question the desirability of the location of the fire break. I wonder whether any discussion has been had with fire behavior specialists regarding the preferable location, given that there's Wildcat Creek so close. And this would be a joint endeavor between East Bay Regional Park, East Bay Mud, and the district. There's no reason why the district should be paying for the total amount.
Thank you. Allison Burns.
Hi, my name is Alison Burns. I run the store there. I'm also a staff writer for the Orinda Youth. So you might know. I came along today because I was concerned that you were not going to do anything more about the nature area. And so I'm very happy to know now that you are as committed as the rest of us. And to the history of it is so important. And we have the kids come in classes, mostly for third graders, but also little ones as well. And they just love the history of it. They need to know. And there's so many new families coming into Orinda now. We have to teach history to the kids so that they can take it home and tell their children along. Tell their parents. So I think what you have to understand, you were talking about the history of the nature area. It was one of the, it was the location of the second school, 1861, the second school in Orinda. And so we have to have the whole educational thing continue. We have to have the history continue. And Wagner, they need to know who Theodore Wagner was and did everything that he did then. So that's kind of all I want to say, that I thank you that you are really so concerned. This is a historical area. And I guess I'll just finish by saying, Pearl Esbach, quoting Pearl Esbach, she says, if you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday. So please continue teaching these kids. My grandson thinks it's absolutely the most wonderful place. He thinks Taurus is the most one person is there. And I think it's 10,000 kids and their parents who think the same thing about choice. So please continue with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Hudson?
No, I'm Bill Hudson. Let's see, this is Ray Select. First of all, thank you for all the work. Thank you for the shared goals and appreciation of trying to keep the direction going. I'm really looking forward to, I think we all are working with you. There's been a lot of questions, and I think you've got a lot of, I think some tremendous opportunity. You've got a lot of resources to draw on that I think you ought to consider, and that's volunteer work. East Bay Regional Park just has same kind of problems with local things. Why don't you talk to them about how they do it? Reg is a wildlife professor. He can tell you a lot about what goes on with mitigating things while the wildlife is there. I'm sure he has connections that could be useful. So I think there ought to be some kind of integration of get all the resources you can, start talking to people about how these different things would work. What kind of income could you get from running a before and after school club in there? Some of your ideas about this story. To start getting those ideas, putting them together, seeing what might work. Maybe you could open things up, gradually involve the community right away to get support, to keep going. But to me, it's start answering all these questions, getting the answer, and putting the pieces together. And I think that should be some kind of a integrated task force with as many people with expertise as you can get to draw on it and find out which you have to work with and who pay. The 100-foot break seems to be sort of artificial. I think that might be worth, like John was saying, worth talking to MLFD about. It's there because of a property line. Well, what about the effect on fire? And maybe you've got some breaks there already that would count, like the creek, and you wouldn't have to do as much work. I don't know. Volunteer work, you could have. There's lots of people who would do stuff that isn't dangerous, like move the brush out to cut it. There's techniques for fire danger with the brush every year. But if you go in times a year, cut before it seeds, you do a lot less work in about 2 years. So you need those kinds of ideas, and I just suggest you set up a way to start getting that information as much as you can with the different attitudes and so forth, and see how it goes. I look forward to working together. So thank you.
Thank you. Brad McCullough?
Yeah, hi. As a 35-year resident of Orinda, I love the area. I love the nature area. I got involved in the nature area through my two daughters who went to Sleepy Hollow. They got involved in the nature area. I started going there on field trips, chaperoning field trips, and really loved it. And that's how I got involved with FUNA and treasure of FUNA. So what it's sounding like is that the school district owning a natural area is problematic because you have to keep that natural area maintained and everything else up to school district standards, up to the school standards that don't exist for other organizations. For instance, ADA accessible. I'm wondering, what in the area needs to be ADA accessible? Is that because it's owned by a school or because the ADA needs to get there? If you look at East Bay Regional Parks District, they have one area that has ADA compliant and they can maintain, a small area, but the rest of the park doesn't need to be ADA compliant. So, things like that to think about. So the curriculum, for instance, the curriculum was created 40 years ago. It was updated maybe 3 years ago, I think it was, right before it was closed down. We re-updated the curriculum with the new standards. And it included both the history of the area as well as the natural aspects of it. And I'm wondering, why spend a ton of money to redo a curriculum when we have one that works? Let's see. The DSA. I was looking at the DSA website, and they specifically exclude greenhouses from the purview. On the website, it says that we do not we do not look at greenhouses. So I'm not sure if that's changed recently or what's going on there, but I'm wondering why they were looking at the greenhouse from that standpoint. It does need to be replaced or turned down or something, but we'd like to help with it. That's the other thing is we've been doing a lot of the volunteering there, and we'd like to help. We have community groups that like to come in and help. They haven't been able to for the last couple Sundays because it's been closed, but we have, many tens of people that really want to come in and help do stuff. So, allowing us to help may mitigate some of these costs.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bertha Newsong.
Could I please go after Kathy?
Sure. Kathy Barrett.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Barrett, lived here since 75, and I really treasure all the work and thought and concern you put into the schools in Orinda. My kids had a fabulous education here. And I have shared some documents with you because they charter our origins of Friends of Wagner Ranch nature area. We came together in 2000 after having worked with teachers at all the schools and all the gardens and all the schools in the nature area itself. The National Wildlife Federation came and honored Orinda as the first school in the nation that had every single school with a biodiversity garden and a nature area. And so that document I'm showing you is kind of what triggered the grassroots Friends of Wagner Ranch nature area, because the Federation was absolutely amazed that Orinda would build corporations. So that got us going. But really positive things came out of that. And other documents, we worked in collaboration. Your first, Ed Silvis, was absolutely fantastic to work with. He actually approved all of the scout things, and so those documents show that we really are committed for what to look to. We see ourselves as a community asset, collaborators, and we are so pleased to see that you have similar goals to our organization. So thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you, Kathy. Bertha Newsong.
Thank you. My name is Eartha Newsong. I live at 20 Irwin Way in Orinda, and I've been here for 28 years. I have known Taurus for perhaps half of that. I myself, in these days of stress, find that going out and being among the trees, for one, and other nature areas is a great relief. I would be surprised if you all don't feel somewhat like that too, because of stresses that we are going under. The need for the nature area is so strong. I did like very much your way of laying out the information for us. I'm hard of hearing, so I was having a lot of trouble. Sorry that you don't have little microphones here. It would be so helpful, especially I was back here. Anyhow, all of it was obviously well thought out. There's so much that has to be done to meet the standards so that you as a school also have to do the same things with your other classes. Considering this a classroom and that young people are also really starving for outdoor learning that they get there. I've run into many of these children when I've walked with Taurus, maybe in the some part of Orinda, we've walked with friends, and parents and children will come up to her and express how important it is for them. When it came to the funds that are needed for doing the renovations, which obviously seem to be required, although somehow or other I wonder if it really has to be quite so severe. I hope that you will approach our representative, I forget what her name is. Anyhow, she's a wonderful person and certainly takes a great interest in this and would be able to help you with getting the funds. One thing that really, really made me feel almost ill was to think of you selling the parcels that you pointed out at the top of the property. That just, this land once upon a time belonged to the Ohlone Native Americans. It seems to me that they themselves would be, there are many of them around. There's also land trusts, Sagorote Land Trust, run by the natives. They're terribly interested in the land that was theirs. I'm wondering if there is not some way to cooperate with them. If that property were to be sold, for heaven's sake, let it go to the Native Americans. Find a way. There are ways to do that. I'm sure there are. I'd be glad to help in
Thank
any
you.
of the searching like that. Okay?
Thank you, Orinda. Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for all your information. A couple of items. Obviously, I represent scouting. I have been the Eagle coach for more than 10 projects at the nature area. You showed a wonderful photo of my most recent project, the newly repaired garden beds below the greenhouse. Stuart, working together, I could have a scout have a ADA compliant, BG packed, stabilized trail, 36 inches wide up to the door of that greenhouse in 2 months. So that kind of collaboration will cover some of the costs that you have already. Those new garden beds, that's over $1,200 worth of investment by us. I worked with Stuart House a lot. There are 4 different projects down across Wagner Creek. There's a packet with photos and emails from Stuart that show our interactions. And he was very happy with the work that was done. He finally told me I didn't need to ask him anymore until it got very heavy structural. I didn't ask you, Stuart, about the garden beds because we were replacing in kind. I also work with the other schools and always interact with the principal. I also work with Todd Trimble, with Parks and Rec, and there's a village arbor sign there. So anyway, we'd love to help. Call on us. The community wants to support and do what we can.
Thank you, Bruce. Taurus?
Like everyone has said, thank you so much for your time putting this together. You have your work cut out for you. But there's a lot of people here and in the community, including myself, that is willing to help you. And I'm keeping my hope that I will actually be able to return to the nature area and work with students again beyond the garden. But I'll take the garden right now. So whatever we can do to get that open, that would be great. Thank you again.
Thank you. turning it over to the board. This item is just on for discussion. Is there any more questions or discussion from the presentation or our earlier conversation?
I don't think at this time for me. I feel like thanks for the presentation, Anita, and thanks to the public for all the comments. Yeah, I think pursuing what we'd already laid forth in terms of how we can help conserve part of it while still maintaining a portion would be good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on to item 6A. This item is on for action. Oh, go ahead.
Just, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for the comments. Can I just clarify? I just want to make sure. So, as our next steps. And we will call Hillary Weiner and E. Phillips separately. I know they'll be able to view this as well to gather their input too, but clearly we have 3 board members here. To seek partnerships and see what are those options with regards to, and I just want to clarify, I know there was a comment around sale, that make sure you read that. We are not recommending a sale of the property. So make sure you see that. But I did like the recommendation around what kind of partnerships to seek and trust. So yes, we would, but the next steps being seeking possible land trust for the conservation of what that would look like for those 2 parcels so that we could open it up in conservation and no details discussed or anything, but what could that look like? How is it open to public? How is it open to students? I mean, all those things to be discussed, but that as an immediate next step. And then continue working with regards to the fire mitigation. And I know we're not responding to the comments, but we have very many discussions around where that 100-foot break should or should not be, or is it based in fire science and so on. So, but we have ongoing meetings with MOFD around Measure X funding, Rebecca Bauer-Kahan's funding, and so on. So we'll continue working on that and moving forward with securing the funding and getting the work started as soon as possible.
Can you confirm or clarify whether DSA or anyone from the state has to also approve that 100-foot fire break?
No, the break is directly, strictly with the fire.
Okay, just want to make
sure. But it's the fish and wildlife. And it has to be, well, we would love to use our local resources. Like we have parents that can give us advice. We have clearly people in the audience that, we have used their expertise. It has to be formalized reports
through the
Fish and Wildlife
and approved by the state. Okay, thank you.
In pursuing partners for 1 or 2 parcels, perhaps Rebecca Bauer-Kahan's office has ideas for what the options are for that. John Muirhead came up when we talked about this months ago, but like, what are the options? I heard another one from the comments. Because there's probably more than one, and it's, as school board members, but also even as administrators, this is not our wheelhouse necessarily. So I'd like more information on what those options are that are out there.
And we're looking at securing somebody who can work on behalf of us to make sure that we're negotiating things that are responsible for the school district, but they have expertise in the land negotiations. Yes. So we're moving forward that hopefully we can start that up right away.
I think it'll be helpful too, as going forward, that maybe there's a graph or something that you can share with what has to be approved by the state, which is mostly everything, right? Anything to do with construction. If it's not Fish and Wildlife, it's DSA. I think that would be helpful as we navigate this path of many agencies and individuals involved.
Yep. We can do that. Okay, I think we're good. Okay. Sorry, I don't mean to.
No,
I just wanted to make sure I got my.
That was helpful.
Okay.
6A.
Yeah, so we just, and I know this was the item, but we have two urgent contracts. One is we just have a haywire air conditioning upstairs that we just haven't been able to. It's been years in the coming. And then an expiring renewal contract.
Great. And this item is on for action. Any discussion before we move to anything?
No, these needs have come up before.
And we've been up there,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
it's, yeah, during meetings, so we know the challenges. So thank you for bringing this forward. Okay, do we have a motion?
This is Vanita. I move to approve the proposal for the Southern Energy Services installation of Pelican wireless control systems for the district office.
We're doing
Wait,
just
no.
one or consent?
Yes.
We can do.
Is there consent, okay?
Yeah, consent, so you can
You
do
amend
B,
your
A,
And
C, B, and C. 6B and C, you can say.
6B and C.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
This is Katie, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 7A, meeting adjournment. Have a
This is
motion.
Katie, I move that we adjourn.
This is Vanita, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.